Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Anderson, and you are listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Interactive Wrestling Radio. Well, hello there. Welcome to another edition of Interactive Wrestling Radio. This is James Walsh, and I gotta tell you, we've been doing this show for 14 years as of November 20th, and every time we get a guest, I get excited. Every time we get a guest, even if they're on a massive tour, I get excited because I know that we can do something different with that guest, or in this case, guests. And these guys are doing a massive media tour. I don't know if they're turning down any interview requests, but what they are not getting is the same kind of questions we ask, which is a little off the wall, but still interesting. So I think you guys are going to enjoy the interviews that we have coming up this week with a guy I've wanted to have on for years, finally have, and a gentleman that we had on years ago and always enjoyed and enjoyed having him back on. Of course, I'm speaking about the guys behind the Pro Wrestling Academy up in St. Paul, Minnesota. That is Mr. Anderson and Cosero Shawn Daivari. So if you guys enjoy these interviews, we're going to post one on each audio file so you guys don't have to fast forward through one to get to the other or vice versa. Give them each their just dues, and after the interview, we'll have the same wrap-up show. So you guys have some good listening material to do this weekend. Thank you for listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio right here on InteractiveWrestlingRadio.com, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com, all on YouTube as well. Stay tuned.
Hey, this is Shawn Daivari, and you guys are listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio. On the Newsmaker line with me right now is a gentleman I'm extremely excited to have on the air. His poor podcast co-host knows how excited I am because I've been bugging him for quite some time. The one and only Mr. Anderson. Anderson, had to do it. Good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's an honor to have you on. Ken Anderson, by the way, and former TNA World Champion and former WWE Superstar. Great guest to get, and I'm really glad to have you on, but we're having you on to talk about the Wrestling Academy, your Wrestling Academy that you opened up in St. Paul, Minnesota. Basically, how did this come about? Because it kind of caught me by surprise.
So this is something that I've sort of wanted to do for a couple of years now, and it's my wrestling schedule. I was doing a lot of independent bookings overseas and even some stuff here in the United States. I've got kids, and I got twins. They're almost 3. They'll be 3 in January. And, I kind of wanted to start slowing down. I wanted to start falling down less for a living. And, I've always enjoyed passing on the knowledge. I've always enjoyed training and teaching people. And I just felt like it was time to do that. And Minneapolis, there's a vacuum here in Minneapolis. It used to be such a hotbed for professional wrestling. Tons of some of the biggest names that you ever heard of in the business.
Absolutely. Well, the hotbed of the AWA. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just from my era, you had Austin Aries, ODB, myself, Lenny Lane, Daivari, a bunch of guys who did pretty well. Eric Cannon did very well for himself. Mm-hmm. And you just really have nothing going on here right now, or very little, I should say. There are a few promotions that run, but very few professional wrestling schools. And, Daivari and I spun our wheels for so many years trying to make it to the dance. We didn't really have, You know, it was just trial and error. And what we wouldn't have given to have the ability to have people who had actually been there and knew how to get there and knew what to do and knew what it took to stay there and just sort of have an all-encompassing education in the professional wrestling business. And that's what we want to do with the academy.
Very cool. And it is different because your school is on the opposite side of the country, because in New York, New Jersey, where you used to live, there's a school in just about every county. And a lot of them are trained, and I'll be honest with you, for the interest of fairness, one of the guys that runs one of those schools is a friend of mine named Kevin Knight, who runs IWF out of northern New Jersey. But there's a lot of guys who never really did much that are teaching wrestlers to wrestle, and those guys, unfortunately, are not getting trained by the best people, so they don't go on to do much. Where you guys, yourself and Daivari, you've been to WWE and you've been to TNA, so you definitely have more of a rounded perspective on it all.
You know, I don't want to take any, just because you didn't make it to the dance doesn't necessarily mean that you can't understand what it takes or what they're looking for, or understand basic ring psychology and how to do moves and things like that. But I just feel like we're some people who, I've been wrestling now for almost 18 years. Daivari's been wrestling for about that long. Molly Holly, who's also going to be part of the school, is going to be the head female trainer. Has had a tremendous storied. She's a WWE legend. I believe she will be in the Hall of Fame very soon. You've got Arya Daivari, who is on his way. Just wrestled on Monday Night Raw.
Yes,
and had a great showing for himself. You got Eric Cannon, who has been a tremendous success in the independent wrestling gig. Sure. Done Ring of Honor and wrestled in Japan, wrestled all over the United States. Many people know who he is. And we just thought, that's a pretty good resume.
I would say.
Pretty good resumes. And we want to be able to present that to people. And we all have our strengths, and some of us, we have our weaknesses, we have our strengths. So we feel that we will be able to really help and mold people, and it's not just going to be the stuff that you do in the ring. It's going to be the professionalism that goes along with what we do. It's how to talk to people in the locker room, how to not be a jerk, to be able to learn from the mistakes that I've made in the business, from running my mouth to not standing up for myself when I should have, to just all sorts of the successes that we've had too. And it's going to be, we are going to have I think an interesting take on how we approach wrestling, because I don't look at wrestling as just wrestling. I look at it as acting, and I'm going to take that approach. So we're going to use all kinds of different tools. We're going to have comedians come in and do seminars on improv. We're going to have acting coaches come in and work with them. We're going to have...
That is genius. That's a great idea.
Ventriloquists come in and talk and teach these guys how to be able to, talk in the ring without the camera picking you up. Things like that I don't think anybody's ever really looked at. And we're also going to have, from time to time, we'll have guest trainers, because everybody's recipe for success looks different. My recipe for success is way different than Shawn Daivari's, and his is way different than Molly Holly's. And then on top of that, you get to, all of the Rolodex that we have amassed over the years. We pretty much know everybody in the wrestling business, and we plan on reaching out to those people and paying them to come in for a weekend and do a Saturday and Sunday seminar, to have Scott Hall in town to do a Saturday and Sunday seminar with our students. And that's just, that's not something that's set in stone. That's just an example that I'm using. But, a guy like that, here's my recipe for success.
That's genius.
And, that's, to me, the best way that you learn, is you learn by working with people who are better than you, and you learn by, taking from multiple different sources. A little bit from here, a little bit from here, make it your own. And I think that's a recipe for success.
I would tend to agree with you. And I think it's a genius idea to incorporate acting. I know when somebody like Vince Russo, who I know you have some experience with, said that wrestling is however many percent, he said, 75% acting and 25% what you could do in the ring. He got a lot of flack online, but there's some logic to that. There's definitely some logic to that. So having that aspect of your school.
I don't understand where the flack comes from. I really don't, because you're given a script. You're told, play this emotion. You're either mad or you're sad or you're betrayed or you're whatever. Here, go read these lines and say them as you would. I don't understand why people cannot separate the fact or figure out the fact that this is what we do. We act. We're actors. And the problem is, in wrestling, a lot of times we're guilty of being really bad actors. You get these people who don't have any acting experience, who have never looked at it that way,
right?
Who don't take an acting class, who then are given a script. They go out there and they literally, you can see that in their head they're reading it off of a script,
right?
Instead of
kind of like porno acting on wrestling TV, right?
It's terrible. It's like sometimes I watch and it's like 3 hours of D-movie quality acting, and like you wouldn't watch an hour and a half of it at home. If you did, it's as a joke with your buddies, like once a month, you get together and pick the worst possible movie, and okay, we're gonna watch this just to laugh at it.
Yeah.
I love this business, and I'm not saying that everybody's a bad actor, but I think a lot of times wrestlers are guilty of it, and I would like to be a part of changing that sort of perception.
Very cool.
It's okay to say that we're actors. It's okay.
Well, I actually have a question for you that I was going to ask you later on in the interview, but I'll ask you now. If you ever listen to our show, you'll know that I love wrestling, I love rock and roll, and I am a fanatic with voice acting. And you just recently did that earlier this year, some voice acting, and I was curious if that's something you're going to be pursuing as well as the school.
Absolutely. I love voice acting. I think it's something that is not hard on the body. I think it takes a certain level, a certain skill level that I don't think people realize just how tough it can be.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, how easy it can be, because, a lot of the good guys out there, a lot of the, really popular voice actors, guys that get tons of work, never leave their house. They literally roll out of bed and they go downstairs to their studio and they, in their pajamas, their hair moshed, and read lines, and then they send it into the studio and stuff like that. But it's something that I've always been fascinated by, and I love it. And at the same time, it's an extremely hard thing to get into. It's a tight-knit group of people, and
it sure is.
Well,
it sure is.
As you well know, I'm sure.
It sure is. Well, I'm going to ask you some questions about your career, but finishing up at the school for now, and I'll obviously circle back to it, is this school, the way that you train your students, going to be different than the way that you were trained?
Yes. But not in the sense, like, I didn't have it rough. The guys that I broke in under were fantastic, and they knew. I was fortunate because I just rolled the dice. I didn't know any better. I just heard you can go to wrestling school. I went online, happened to find the right one. I just reached out to the first wrestling school that popped up on my feed. I think it was AOL.com at the time, searched. And but in saying that, there were 3 to 4 schools in the area that were absolutely terrible. That had I gone through them, I maybe wouldn't have known better.
Right.
And I would have been trained how to do things wrong.
So you got lucky with that search.
I really did. I got lucky. And the guys trained me. But here's the one thing. I will say that over the years, I've been around a lot of training in the professional wrestling industry. And the one thing that sort of always drives me crazy is this notion that you have to beat them into submission. Like, we have to, I realize it's old school mentality that they used to beat the hell out of guys. And those ones who were tough stuck around. Times have changed. And we want to make sure that people are doing things safely. We want to make sure that people are doing things correctly. And if they have something to offer, I don't want to just, if a guy comes into our school and weighs 350 pounds and he doesn't appear to have an athletic bone in his body, but he loves wrestling and thinks that he can offer something, I would like to help him find what that is. I'm not going to say, oh, you can't be in the wrestling business because you can't do 1,000 squats. You can't take 200 bumps today. Had somebody had that type of mentality, I'm not seeing Mick Foley's 350 pounds, but had somebody had that mentality or attitude towards Mick Foley, he wouldn't be a legend that he is today.
Absolutely, and everybody is the good thing about wrestling is not everybody has the same cookie cutter look. Evidenced by, as you said, Mick Foley, somebody like that, to go on and be for a time the biggest thing that WWE had is incredible. Especially when that used to just be the land of the giants, as they used to say. Let me ask you this question. This is the first time I've ever had you on, but we had Steve Austin on, not to name drop, and at the time he had said something interesting about you. He actually said he was a big fan of your work, and this is 2008 time period, and he thought that you had the potential to go far. Now, what you're talking about with your school is that you're going to be taking some of these guys under your wing, having been there. When you were a younger guy, and obviously in 2008 you were a younger guy, but you were more experienced than most, did anybody take you under your wing in the WWE?
Oh, yeah. When I first got to WWE, it was Benoit. Wow. Benoit and Eddie Guerrero.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that name. What was that? I'm kidding.
Well, I know I'm not supposed to say that, but
no,
that's the reality. I'm no. Look, what he did was absolutely horrible. But I'm just saying at the time.
Oh no, I'm
kind
joking.
of a big deal. That
you can't take away his incredible contributions to wrestling. No way.
Right. Well, I mean, yes and no. That's a different argument, but what he did was absolutely just horrendous. So I don't know. That's sort of up in the air whether or not I can take that away from him, whatever. But he was a tremendous wrestler. He did a lot of great things in the business. But it was him, Undertaker. Undertaker saw me wrestle with Batista at the Great American Bash.
It was
my first big pay-per-view, and I had a good outing with him. And Taker pulled me aside at TV the next week and said, hey, man, I saw what you did with Batista at the Great American Bash, and I was impressed. I want to work with you. And he went to Vince and said, hey, I want to work with Kennedy. And then shortly thereafter, we got put into a program. It was supposed to be 3 to 4 months, and it ended up being a really long run. And I went around the world and wrestled Taker, Kane. It was MVP and I. Sometimes it was just singles, but we wrestled all over the world several times a week for a very long time. So he was a guy that really took me under his wing. The first time I ever got in the ring with Taker, he literally said in the back, he said, I'm going to call everything to you out of the ring. Like, we're not going to talk about it. We're just going to go out there and I'm going to feel the crowd and we'll just work on the fly. And it was crazy. It was extremely liberating, actually. All I have to do is I have to listen to what he tells me to do and do it well. That's it. So that's
awesome.
That was my experience. And then he slowly but surely, okay, now what's something you'd like to do? And let me start to add my things in there, my little twists. And like I said, I got to be, I consider him a good friend, and he really, really helped me out a lot.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. You probably get asked this a lot, but the classic boxing saying your last name twice, which has become your trademark, and is probably a big part of your mic skill and things that, evident by your mic skill and things you're going to be talking about in your school. Where did the idea to do that come from? Because it seems unfathomable to me that somebody didn't do that already.
Right. I always say it's so stupid to me that I really didn't change the way that I wrestled. All I did was I started saying my last name twice, and 5 weeks later I was on TV. It's interesting how it just takes one little thing for you to find, and that's what puts you over the edge. So I encourage people to just keep trying and tweaking and doing different things. Some stuff will catch on, or it won't.
Right,
but
exactly.
I actually got the idea when I was in high school. I was a high school basketball announcer, and somebody just suggested it to me, as kind of a joke. When I would announce our team, they said, like, you should do, the big, give it a big pop and like really tell our team and say the last names twice, like the old boxing announcers.
Right.
And I did it, and I would have the parents from the other schools come over across, they would come across the gym after the games and stuff. And they'd be like, hey, I just want to tell you that, like, we were really entertained by your announcing. You should keep doing that. And I think you might have a future in announcing. For a long time, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do that or get into radio or something along those lines. So that was, and then when I got to OVW, I never even thought about doing it. But when I got to OVW, Paul Heyman took over. He came in and he told me one night, he goes, go out there, cut the ring announcer off and do your own introduction. Tell him he's a piece of garbage. Tell him you're the only one that can do it, apparently. And when I was on the spot, like on the day, in the ring, it just occurred to me that, hey, I'm going to say my last name twice like I used to. And I did it, and I remember I had like a 30-minute match. It was like an Iron Man match or something like that, or 30-minute Broadway with Brent Albright.
Wow. Yeah.
So we had a decent match. Came back through the curtain, and it wasn't. The feedback I got wasn't like, "Hey, great match! You guys put on a clinic out there." It was, "Man, when you said your last name twice, that was freaking awesome!" And everybody popped in the back. So
strangest things get over.
When wrestlers pop for things, that's when you know that you should stick with it, because we're very cynical. We've seen everything.
Very cool. Well, speaking of popping for things, and I told you I was going to try to ask some other questions, and I bet you don't get asked this one much. I mentioned that I'm a huge rock and roll fan, and your theme song in the WWE was probably the best theme song I had heard since the early 90s. I'm not just talking about when Airbourne did it, though when that happened, that was awesome. Did you have any input at all into what theme song they gave you, or was that kind of something that is way above your head?
I did. I told them that I wanted something that was, when I was on the Indies, I came out to Pour Some Sugar on Me.
Awesome.
By Def Leppard.
Def Leppard, yeah.
And I said, I want something like that. And I actually went into Vince's office several times, week after week, and he would say, what do you think about this? We'd listen to a couple different tracks, and through some tweaking and stuff, I remember he gave me one example where it was whoever the guy's voice, I think it's Jim Johnston.
Jim Johnston, yeah.
But it was the same for a lot of you could always tell, well, it's a big show, and that kind of Eddie Vedder meets that sort of voice.
Maybe,
and,
yeah.
And I said I didn't like that. I really didn't like it, and I wanted more of like what's the lead singer, AC/DC?
Brian Johnson, Bon Scott.
Yeah, like something along those lines,
Yeah.
And that's when he came back and gave me that final one, or the one that I used before Airbourne did it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I just will say, have you ever heard of a band called Texas Hippie Coalition?
I've heard of them. I've never actually downloaded anything. I think there was actually a pick of the week on That Metal Show back in the day, but I never actually downloaded it.
They are, in my humble opinion, absolutely awesome, and I think you should listen to them. I think your listeners should listen to them. And they've toured all over the world, and it's like a cross between Black Label Society and they call it red dirt rock and roll. So it's like, good rock and roll.
I like
the
that.
guy's voice, the lead singer's voice is amazing. It's unique. When you hear it, like, oh, that's Texas Hippie Coalition. It's not. You're possibly listening to something else. But they're actually they've given me the green light to start using one of their songs called GoPro in future. So
that's awesome.
I'm excited about that.
All right. So I'm going to try and try to go to the lightning round a little bit. I told you I'd only keep you about 20 minutes, and we're almost there now. But if you're okay to stay just a few more, I do have some more questions
Sure, absolutely.
for you. All right. So here's a tough one. 7 years later, after the way that you were released by WWE, a little older, a little wiser, any thoughts on how that went down? Any change of opinion on how that went down for you? Because I feel like you got railroaded.
Yes and no. Certain things were out of my control, I think. But leading up to what I've really done is I've sat back and I've reflected like what got me to that point, to where that was the straw that broke the camel's back. You know, the bad suplex that supposedly happened with Randy Orton, which didn't happen with Randy Orton. But you know, the supposed suplex. But the thing was, is like I had done things to get to the point where Vince was like, I'm tired of hearing his name and the negative light. Get rid of him. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
That's on me. That's on me. Yeah.
Oh, well.
And I will say that everybody says like that's the botched suplex. Can I just say that it drives me insane that nobody in the wrestling business uses the term botch. None of the boys ever use the term botch, but it's used as like sort of an insider slang. It drives me insane. I think it's the worst word ever in the history of words.
So you're not a big fan of the Botchamania YouTube series, then?
Well, that I actually am a huge fan of Botchamania, but that's the one thing that I forgive the word for, because it's really funny, and I've actually made it a few times on Botchamania. I'm proud to say. All
right. Well, like I said, I'll try to make this the lightning round, but your time in TNA, I mean, when you came in, you were hot, and you eventually won the world title. I mean, you guys were part of something that I feel was very special with the advancement of TNA, turning it into Impact Wrestling. You guys really were onto something, and this might not be what the internet wants to hear, but I feel like when it was you guys, the big name guys, really pushing the envelope and touring with Impact, it was really onto something. And then it kind of went wah wah wah, and that was it. What is your thoughts on your almost 6 year run with Impact Wrestling, and what did you basically, how do you feel about your time that you spent with TNA Impact Wrestling?
I had a blast, and I think the most frustrating part about that experience was there were issues outside of the wrestler's control that continue to happen, and I'm not there anymore, so I'm not privy to that information really. I know what I hear through friends and stuff like that, but I will say that the one thing that I loved about TNA was the locker room and the talent roster that came through there, whether it was guys who were old-timers or sort of middle of the road like me, or brand new, trying to cut their teeth and make a name for themselves. Everybody busted their butts, went out there and performed, and I believe that any problems experienced by the company had nothing to do with talent.
I agree. I would agree with that.
And there were times where things were going on behind the scenes where it should have just been a miserable existence, and I would look around the locker room and guys are late, 3 months behind on paychecks and stuff like that. Nobody's been paid in the locker room, or very few people have been paid in the locker room for 3, maybe sometimes more than that.
Right.
Remember at one time I was owed for like 30 shows.
Wow.
But everybody still showed up, put on their happy face, and when we were out there wrestling, and even when we were back in the locker room, we were there to do a job. We were there to work, and we believed in the company. And even though there was frustration within like management and those kinds of things, like we still believed that, hey, if we all work hard and stick through this tough time, we'll be better off
Are we talking more, 2014-15 time frame, or is this pretty much the whole time that you were there?
Pretty much the whole time that I was there.
Oh, wow, okay. All right. Well, I guess my question is going to be next, going back to the school. Is it going to be strange for you, being a Green Bay Packer fan, running a school out of Minnesota?
No, I've actually lived in Minnesota since 2000.
Really? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm 2000, 2001, actually. Something like that. I moved over here from Green Bay because it was just, there was so much going on here at the time. There were so many different independent groups running shows, and there were camps over here. I ended up going to train with Brad Rangans for a year. And really,
AWA legend, Brad Rangans, yes, sir.
It was, training with him was amazing. He taught me little simple things that completely changed the way that I looked at the business. And, little things that ended up setting me apart from other people. It's pretty amazing. So, yeah, no, it's not going to be weird because I've lived here for a really long time. It's like my second home. So.
I wanted to praise you if you still have it in the closet. You wore a jersey on Impact once. It looked like it was like a half Packer, half Vikings jersey. It was number 4, Brett Favre. And I looked high and low on Google and YouTube and eBay for that. That was badass, man. I love that jersey.
No. It wasn't. It was an Adam Carricker Redskins jersey.
You're kidding me.
No, it was an Adam Carricker Redskins jersey because I had a bet with Adam Carricker about the Monday night Seattle game where, remember the touchception where it was they had the replacement referees.
Oh, yeah, the Foot Locker guys, right.
It was the absolute, worst call in NFL history.
That was the Hail Mary pass, right?
Yeah, the Hail Mary, yeah.
Yeah, that's right,
and
right.
It changed, the next week, the NFL said, okay, they were going to have riots. People were like, that is the worst call we've ever seen. And so anyway, we had a bet that day that if I picked the Packers, he picked Seattle, and it was if Seattle won, I had to wear a Redskins jersey. I had to wear an Adam Carricker jersey. And I was like, well, then you have to wear a Favre jersey or whatever, or an Aaron Rodgers jersey. And he goes, dude, I played for the Washington Redskins. I can't do that. So he was going to wear a Mr. Anderson shirt if he had won. So, or if I had won. So that was the bet.
Very cool, very cool. 2 more questions, and I promise I'll let you go. I have to address this, and I should have done it a moment ago. The rumors of the sale of TNA, basically, thumbs up or thumbs down? Do you think it would be a terrible thing, as I do, for the wrestling industry if that were to happen to the wrong people? That would result in it closing.
You know what? I will say this. Even if the WWE buys TNA, there is enough stuff going on out there that somebody else could make a run. Nature abhors a vacuum. So I think if TNA goes away, or even if it it's gobbled up by WWE, there's still going to be a void there where people still want an alternative. So I think that somebody somewhere at some point will step in and sort of fill that void, if that makes sense.
I hope so.
And there's so much stuff going on out there right now that's really, I think with the right financial backing, it really could take off. You've got, so much stuff going on overseas. You've got New Japan. You have Ring of Honor. I mean, and I've said this for years, and Daivari agrees with me, but if somebody comes back and makes, everything's PG now. Everything's got to be your kids have to be able to watch it. If somebody comes and makes a program that is geared towards adults, I think wrestling takes off again. That's just my humble opinion.
You think an Attitude Era style show would kickstart it?
I really do. I think that the idea that men and women go out and fight each other and can't curse a little bit. Like, I've never been in a bar fight or a fight in my life where there wasn't 57 curse words slung. And when two guys are super heated at each other and they're throwing gosh darn it and bad gummits, like, it just
starts to sound like a cartoon.
And the thing is if you look at the successful television shows over the past few years have been extremely edgy. Sons of Anarchy, Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones. It's violent. It's adult oriented. I think, I don't know. I just think sometimes we insult people's intelligence and we go for the lowest common denominator. That makes sense.
That does make perfect sense. All right, and the last one's kind of a softball for you, and it's going to be, how could fans that are listening to our interview today find out more about the Academy?
You can go to theacademyprowrestling.com, and it has links to all of our social media, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, and there's a number for you to call, a 1-800 number. No, I don't believe it's a 1-800 number, but it is a number that you can call to get in touch with us. And right now we're offering, our tuition is normally going to be $3,000. If you sign up before November 1st, it's $1,000. And we think that with what you're getting, we know that with what you are getting, that gets you 1 year at our facility with some of the, some very great trainers, people that have been there, done it, and who are eager to sort of give back to the business and foster in the next batch or the next generation of wrestlers.
Okay, and yourself being the mic expert and more of a technical wrestler, Daivari being more of a cruiserweight style wrestler, you're getting just off the top two very different styles that are going to be teaching you how to do things. And with everything else that you're talking about doing, like bringing in actors and bringing in ventriloquists and everything, it's going to be a whole different class of graduate than maybe we would see at a different school. So I think that it's definitely a great deal.
Yeah, have you ever seen Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yes, I have.
So there's a part in there where as he's learning how to pose, he takes ballet lessons to learn how to be more graceful. And that was sort of my thought, like, what kinds of stuff can we do that people wouldn't normally associate with pro wrestling that'll give them more tools in their toolbox to be able to be a success? And so that's the way we're kind of looking at it.
That is awesome. Well, I wish you guys the best of luck. We'll be having Daivari on next, but, man, I can't thank you enough for spending as much time as you did with us. I'm sorry for going over.
No worries at all. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and hope Daivari doesn't bore you to tears.
This is Impact Wrestling's Aaron Rex, and you are listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio.
The magic's in my head, I can't understand, but I still like my chances. And it doesn't really matter to me, I take my stand, but I still like my chances. Ow! No, 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 no.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio right here on WrestlingEpicenter.com. It's James Walsh. I'm flying solo right now. Don't worry, I haven't fired Patrick. Patrick just is very, very busy. Patrick lives in Maryland, and he works in Virginia, which means, for those who don't know, you got to drive through this, I guess it's not really a state. You got to drive through Washington, D.C. That sounds like fun to you, then you probably enjoy spending time in a car. A lot of time in the car. So that's where Patrick is right now in traffic. I figured I could tackle this one solo and do a little bit of talking about my take on things that are going on right now. And I'm not going to have as long-winded of a segment as we typically do, because one guy talking to himself for long periods of time probably doesn't strike anybody as great radio. However, I did want to go over some of the topics that were discussed both in this interview and that are going on in wrestling right now. So hopefully you guys will give me the chance to say my take, because I believe I know everything. It is I, La Maharashti. Sorry, that's another guy who talks to himself a lot. I happen to agree with him a lot, but I'll get to that another time. Here's what's going on. I wanted to discuss the school, the Pro Wrestling Academy, the Wrestling Academy that Shawn Daivari and Ken Anderson are doing, and I want to explain why I think this is a great idea. I mentioned in my Anderson interview that Vince Russo took a lot of flack for saying that he should get actors that are athletic and teach them to wrestle instead of taking wrestlers and teaching them to be actors. And he got a lot of flack online because wrestling fans typically have a knee-jerk reaction to everything and then acceptance. It's almost like the 5 stages of denial. But Vince Russo's right. Yes, you heard me say that. I agree with Vince Russo. Vince Russo is right. Not necessarily that you need to get actors, then teach them to wrestle, but acting is a huge part of wrestling. And for those who really disagree, I'll ask you who your best or most favorite worker is of all time. And if you tell me Bret Hart, I'll tell you that Bret Hart learned to take falls from a stuntman before he learned to wrestle. And there is the longevity to his career before Goldberg kicked him in the head and ended it. But we'll get to that maybe later on. Basically, what I wanted to just say and praise Daivari and Anderson for having the foresight to do is to see what wrestling is now. It is at least 25% what you can sell, talking-wise, and then the rest is in the ring. We talked a few weeks ago with the guest from Paragon Pro Wrestling who talked a lot about the fact that he can learn to do every single move in the wrestling book, assuming there is a wrestling book. And if there is, I don't mean like one from ECW Press. I mean an actual, this is every single move that you can do in wrestling. Assuming there is one, and I don't think there is, he learned them. And guess what? He did them in NXT and he got fired because nobody gave a crap about the moves that he was doing. You know why that is? Because, well, you have to give people a reason to care. And part of the reason you got to give people a reason to care is by having a character and by being able to act that character out. Everybody says a character is who you are. It is. To some extent. It's an exaggeration of who you are. That's what makes it great. Anyway, I wish I could go to this school, man. I'm 35 years old. I'm obviously too old for you. I'm not the next Diamond Dallas Page. I know that. If you're ever wondering why I never was a wrestler, I don't know if I've ever talked about this much on the air, but I'll talk about it now. I am legally blind. I do not have good vision. And I was basically told, and if you doubt this, Bill DeMott had a similar situation where if you take too many shots to the head, guess what? You can put the lights out for good. Well, my lights might be dim, not intelligently, intellectually, I should probably say, but eyesight-wise, but they're not out, and I don't need anything to help me get there. But I would have loved to have done this. I mean, I love this business. I get it better than most. Even Macho Man said, "You really know the business." And that was a big compliment to me. Changed my life forever. Anyway, so anybody in the area, in the Midwest, in the Minnesota area, in Green Bay, in Chicago, anybody in that area, check out the Pro Wrestling Academy. Give Ken Anderson and Shawn Daivari a call. I think you're really going to benefit, and I think the whole business, ultimately, down the road is going to benefit from some really trained guys who have an idea about what they're doing. All right, so the next topic, not about the school, is going to be Alberto Del Rio and Paige and their sordid love affair, which has been going on. Here's basically the story in a nutshell. Alberto Del Rio's married, not to Paige. They start having a relationship. It causes big problems for Alberto at home. Paige is barely not a teenager, and she's acting as a barely not a teenager would act online about her boyfriend. It's seriously like stuff out of high school. So Alberto Del Rio now misses, after being fired by WWE. I forgot that part. He got fired by WWE, and if you strip it down, Triple H says that he feels he was a bad influence on Paige. So here we are. Alberto Del Rio misses a AAA event, blames it on a stabbing, changes that story several times. Now he says Paige was attacked by a mugger. Paige then goes on to fail a drug test. Alberto, Paige, and Paige's family go out and say, oh, she was taking painkillers that weren't on WWE's approved list, to which WWE immediately releases a statement saying, no, she was taking street drugs, which are against the law and against our drug policy, not painkillers. Paige does not respond and is now getting neck surgery for the injury that probably had her on the drugs to begin with. Here's my question, and I don't like Triple H very much, and I've been very critical of him. I respect him, but you don't have to like everybody you respect. If there is a slight possibility that they're right, maybe Alberto Del Rio is a bad influence on this young girl. Maybe. I'm just throwing that out there. Next topic, speaking of Mexican wrestlers, is Lucha Underground. I want to say that in my household, Lucha Underground has become something we'll sit down and watch, just like football on Sundays. Man, I love it. Characters that are larger than life, well-told stories, a gritty wrestling feel, almost feels that arena almost feels like the Sportatorium, which I view as the mecca of professional wrestling. It just has that dirty, gritty fight feel, and I love it, man. If you're not seeing Lucha Underground, check it out on YouTube every Wednesday night. Check it out on El Rey Network. You probably get it. You might not watch it much because there's nothing but Airwolf and MacGyver reruns on there and things like that. But it's a really good channel. I watch it a lot. I really do. So check out Lucha Underground. And hopefully we're going to be having Matt Stryker on next week to discuss Lucha Underground. Matt Stryker, by the way, the former WWE superstar, is their ring announcer along with Vampiro. And if you watch Lucha Underground enough, Vampiro starts to make sense, which scares the living hell out of me that it makes sense to me. Okay, two more topics. The next topic is the TNA sale. Now today, well, let's take a step backwards. There once was a company called TNA. It was a Wednesday night pay-per-view, and it was on exclusively pay-per-view. They started it with Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Jarrett. They were the primary owners. And about 12 weeks in fact, it was 11 weeks in, and then week 12 was a best-of episode because they got screwed over by a guy sent by WWE to ruin the company. Enter Dixie Carter and her money. And that's how TNA stayed afloat in 2002 up to this point. Dixie Carter has spent big bucks, lost big bucks, made some bucks, but has had her purse strings cut by mom and dad. And the end result now is you have a TNA company that is apparently up for sale, though nobody within the company has officially confirmed that it is for sale, with Billy Corgan, the lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins, trying to purchase it. He's been given the role of president of the company, and he has booked some stuff that has been entertaining. Billy Corgan's influences are a new approach that feels a little bit like the late 80s WWF. Obviously, with TNA's budget and their, where they filmed and everything, it has to be a different feel, and it is. But you can kind of feel that, especially when you watch things like Eli Drake and his Facts of Life segment, because they're all about you. It takes a lot to get 'em right. Oh, sorry. I was going off on one there. But those segments have a very Piper's Pit feel. Even Ken Anderson, when he was doing his segment, had a segment that was similar to that, but that predates Billy Corgan, which defeats my purpose. Stripping it back again, though, Billy Corgan's trying to buy the company. Weeks leading into Bound for Glory, we're not sure there's going to be a Bound for Glory because there's rumors that TNA is going to sell itself to WWE or sell the tape library to WWE, which would be disastrous. And apparently just keep the name. Well, I've never heard of that happening before. Maybe Ohio Valley Wrestling, but that's only because WWE actually owned it at the time, or that they were doing that anyway. So that's why they own, to 2006 of the OVW footage. Long story short, it would be disastrous for wrestling. Billy Corgan today, by the way, files a lawsuit against TNA, which he is the president of, and Dixie Carter for undisclosed reasons. I don't know. This is not an insider view, but my belief is that Ric Flair is right. I believe that this is a result of Dixie Carter starting rumors about WWE trying to buy TNA to jack up the price on Billy Corgan. And if there's evidence to that, then we're in some trouble. And the last thing we want is for Billy Corgan to get pissed off and to screw off and leave Dixie with a company she doesn't want, only having one buyer in mind, if they're even interested in WWE. And guess what? We just lost an alternative. And to those out there who keep saying, well, I hope they do sell. This way we can watch TNA on the WWE network. Number one, you'll only be watching the old footage because they'll end the company. That's it. It's over. And number two, you can watch TNA right now, a actual living entity, on Pop TV every Thursday night at 8 o'clock. So how's about you do that instead of wanting to watch it on a WWE product? There's a novel concept, because that NXT you watch is not an alternative to WWE. It is WWE. I'm not knocking NXT. I think it's great. Don't get me wrong. It's great for the business. It's great for the fans. I just think that the fans view it as an independent, and it ain't independent of nothing. Not a thing. All right, so we're going to wrap up here. I hope you guys enjoyed my talking points. We talked a little bit about TNA. We talked a little bit about Lucha Underground. We talked about Paige. You guys are the reason I still do this. I love doing these interviews. I'm still good at them, I'd like to believe. I think that was more evident with the Ken Anderson one than the Shawn Daivari one, because we kind of just riffed, as they say. But I love doing this. I'll always love doing this. And you guys make it happen. This is almost my 14-year anniversary. My God, I'm getting to be an old guy, 35 years old. Started this when I was 21. Thank you guys for allowing me to live my dream. Going back to it again, when I was a kid, I remember my parents asked what I want to be when I grow up, and I said I want to be a wrestling announcer. And let's just say the exact response was, it's a good thing that your grandparents are dead, because they'd roll over in their grave if they knew that. Here I am, doing what I said I wanted to do, and I love it. Thank you guys for tuning in, and stay tuned next week for Matt Stryker here on Interactive Wrestling Radio. Enjoy!